Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we have special guest artist Ken Kimball joining for a conversation. Ken is an artist in every sense of the word, and he's also a musician. Ken's here to talk to us about his journey through and his study of consciousness. Moreover, he's here to share about some of his practices as it relates to being present and being still. Ken's practices help him maintain a sense of fulfillment, expand his consciousness, and also contribute to his creativity as an artist. And with that, we'll kick it over to our conversation and welcome today's Paradigm Sherpa, Ken Kimball, to the channel. I guess let's just get going. Again, thanks for doing this and being willing to catch up. I was looking at today's conversation as like, let's just kind of take a walk through our lives and our journey through consciousness, I guess. You know, when we had our first initial meeting, it became clear that the subject of consciousness was something that was important to both of us. And I don't know, like, it struck me, you mentioned to me when we first talked that you got into studying consciousness fairly early in life, or at least comparatively compared to me. I'm just wondering if you can maybe open up and just share, what was your earliest memory of self-reflection, questioning what, existence and awareness and consciousness is? And maybe we can just start from there.
Yeah, it sounds like a great place to start, because I am also very interested to hear more about how music was such an important part for you.
Yeah.
When I was young, like maybe around 12 years old, I was really into kung fu movies.
Yes.
And but I realized what I liked most about it was meditation.
Yeah.
And so I remember I had a paper out and saved up my money and went to this huge fair where they sold ceramic Buddhas, because the karate studio I was going to at the time had one, and they told me that's where they bought it. So I was saving up all summer for this thing, and I bought it, put it in my bedroom, and I would just sit in front of it. And maybe I would light incense, but I just closed my eyes, and I didn't really know what I was supposed to be doing, because the only instruction I really had was these kung fu movies. Mm-hmm. But in hindsight, when I look back, it was probably some of my purest meditation experiences, because I really didn't have much conception going on anyways. But I would say that was my earliest interest. And then art was always the main focus. So it seemed like creativity had its own sense of contemplative types of moments where you're looking for inspiration. And I think going through the whole college scene of learning how to become an artist kind of engaged that. But I was also able to get back into martial arts later on in life, which helped. And somebody I met had done hypnosis. So I thought to get a better education of consciousness, I would study hypnosis. Mm-hmm. And that helped with my art. Okay. And I felt because art is very competitive, so to stay creative, learning self-hypnosis techniques were really helpful. And I got a lot of results. So much so that I preferred hypnosis over commercial art. Yeah. And did that for a few years.
So can I ask you, so I'm vaguely familiar with hypnosis as a general concept, but when I think of hypnosis, I kind of think of like hypnotic regression, where you're like going into the layers of your subconscious to figure out, to meet archetypes or patterns of behavior, or, I guess, what is it from your perspective? What's hypnosis, and how do you use it for your art? Because I just have maybe a novice's or layman's understanding of it. So it'd be cool to just peel the layer back a little and understand what you mean by it.
Sure. I think one of the models I just thought of that's pretty helpful is when you think of an iceberg, mm-hmm. and the part that sticks up out of the ocean is the part you see. Yeah. But really, the larger parts of that iceberg exist beneath the water. Mm-hmm. And if you think of consciousness as the water, you could think of your subconscious as the larger part of that iceberg.
Okay.
And that interacts with everything in the water. But you have all these filters, really. So most of your existence is in the top of that iceberg that you see.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times you're using your mind to be clever with creativity or with strategy.
Yeah.
And if you're able to let go of that thinking world, you have access to that larger part of the iceberg, which coexists with everything else. So that subconscious has a lot of information that I think when we go to sleep each night, we access that information through our dreams, or when we're in nature, we can access that naturally. And when we're in a trance state, we can access that. So trance states happen all the time. Like if you're watching TV, you can't believe that the person is that actual person versus the character that they're playing. You have to be in a state of trance to go along with the show.
Right.
To think that that character in the show is the focus of entertainment, when really they have a completely different birth name.
Mm-hmm.
So you surrender an aspect of that thinking mind to go into a trance to be entertained. And you can harness that for health or for creativity, investments, because again, that subconscious part of us has so much more information than the thinking part of our mind. So we just learn how to use a trance state to kind of enter the various levels of consciousness. And when it's like any other skill, you just get good at it and know that you do it all the time.
This is great. I mean, this is super interesting because basically what I'm gathering from it is that in order to put out the art or have the energy to, or the creativity for the art, it's helpful to go into those deeper levels of awareness besides the tip of the iceberg, because that's where there's a pool of self-creativity and information deeper than what you're normally aware of. And then, like, to extend the metaphor that you shared, the ocean of all consciousness, you could potentially tap into that as well. And then you bring that back to the tip of the iceberg and create your art from there.
That's the model, I would think. Yeah. And I also think like this structure that you're doing for this video here.
Yeah.
After we met at Starbucks and talked for a while, I was curious on how you came up with this idea to do a casual conversation instead of actual questions. I mean, did you have an experience like that where you kind of went with it?
Honestly, just by meeting you and understanding a little bit about you, it became apparent to me that it would be better served for the listeners if we just talked. Like, we both have such overlapping interests that and have had those journeys into the subconscious that I felt like it would be way more natural and listenable and meaningful to other people if they just listen to us riff about what's interesting to us. So, I of course you want structure because there's so many things that I've learned about you that are interesting that I think people should hear about. But I also know that in the art of podcasting, or whatever you want to call this, that authentic conversation is really what catches people and catches me. Like, if I'm listening to something, if I feel like it's very scripted and dry and too manicured, it doesn't feel real, So I guess that's kind of where I was coming into this. Like, hey, let's just have a conversation, because we're undoubtedly going to touch on a lot of interesting things that will resonate with a broad spectrum of people.
Well, I thought that was cool because I also, the cookie cutter type of predictability is, lackluster in a way. So I was kind of inspired by the fact that you're creating maybe a new way to express interesting topics. And so that, I know we talked a little bit about what kind of inspired you to explore consciousness more. And I'd love to be able to hear that story again.
Yeah.
I think it was you were at a concert, right?
Yeah, so I've probably had several steps along the journey of consciousness. I would say that the most meaningful Kickstarter for me was ingesting psilocybin mushrooms with some friends, and more specifically at a concert. I was at a Fish concert with a group of close friends, and Fish is like highly instrumental music. There's not a ton of, I mean, there is lyrics, but you go through long stretches at the shows where it's up and down kind of live music, where it's like slow, rhythmic, jazzy into rock, and it takes you up and down, or can take you up and down the spectrum. And I like to close my eyes when I'm at the shows, so that really drives that sort of introspection, and that is accelerated with psilocybin. Now, certainly it's not necessary, but for me, that was my first real dip into the sea of consciousness, not knowing it even existed. I didn't even know that the, stick with this metaphor, I didn't even know that I was living everyday life as the tip of the iceberg, right? I didn't know that there was a bottom of the iceberg, let alone this sea of consciousness. And as the show was going on and I kept my eyes closed and the psilocybin was taking effect, the music was playing, I started to go down inside, and actually it was kind of horrifying. Like, I didn't like what I saw for a lot of it. Like, I saw these patterns of behavior, these things that I've done that were selfish, mean, etc. Just kind of these real ugly aspects of myself, and it was hard to deal with at the time because I told myself, oh, I'm supposed to be here having fun, but the party quickly turned into hell. And rather than, well, I tried to fight it at first. I tried to like will my way out of feeling these things and learning these things about myself. But then I was like, I started to accept it because I realized it was all true. And it was truth that I had never had the will to seek out or the bravery to endure. It was kind of like my life at that point was the tip of the iceberg, and I'm looking out at the sky, and I was looking for answers out there and how to live my life, and I thought I was just this great shiny tip of the iceberg kind of thing. And then going inside during that show, it was just awful. And it's kind of like Dante's, is it Dante or his Inferno, where you like talk about how you have to go through hell to get to heaven. So I kept going through this experience, and eventually, as I accepted these things about myself, a change started happening. And actually, one thing I really want to point out too, during this experience, I felt like I was the focus of something non-physical, but that was like a giant eye in the sky looking at me and judging me. I forget the gentleman who came up with the term, but it's called a numinous experience, where it's like so profound, so awesome, it's actually like borderline terrifying. So, while I'm going through this, it's like there was this independent observer watching all this, judging me. But then when I stopped lying to myself, accepted what I saw on the bottom part of the iceberg, I felt this amazing sense of healing. And then I started welling up with just overwhelming feelings of love and interconnectivity, and I opened my eyes, and my friends were all kind of nodding and smiling at me, and then the music was very uplifting, and it was all coming together into this beautiful, blissful experience where I didn't know, intellectually, but or maybe I knew intellectually, but equally important, I felt physically that I was one interconnected thing with every single thing and person around me. And it was the only way I can describe it. It was like what the Buddhists call an enlightenment moment, and or Christ consciousness, or non-duality, exactly, where as within, so without. Everything that I felt inside me was mirrored externally, and I was one with it all. I don't know. The best feeling I've ever felt ever after going through that hell experience, and from that point forward, it literally changed my perspective of who I am. I no longer just looked at myself as the tip of the iceberg. I knew that there was so much more there. Now, the next 2-3 days, I came back to that perspective of viewing myself as the tip of the iceberg, but I knew that there was more there. And so that's what really sent me on this journey that I've been on for, that was probably when I was early 20s, and I'm 35 now, so it's been like 15 plus years of exploring consciousness and being super into that, just from reading and being as well. And speaking of being, I'd like to pivot back to you on this. When we first talked, obviously we had this shared common interest in consciousness, but something that you really, that stood out to me that you said was a big focus on the being aspect, right, versus the thinking about it and not being in the moment aspect about it. You maybe just like open up a little stream of thought on the importance of being, and maybe how you discovered the importance of being, what you do to stay in the now, kind of thing.
Sure. And I like the way you described everything of how you were the tip of the iceberg, and then you had that moment where you became the ocean, and you didn't know that you could become the ocean. No. And in the idea of being, or in the idea of having a non-dualistic focus, I just want to say that I can relate to the hellish realms. It's almost the concept of know thyself.
Yeah.
Because there certainly, before there was more of an anchor in this being, you kind of have to go through a sense of self inventory of who you are, and just to explain a little bit about how maybe I have an understanding of the being part, was, I was more or less living a normal, average life as a commercial artist. And then it's like I fell off that path because I had a head injury. And the 20 hours of brain surgery really kind of reset everything I knew about life. But I had a certain taste for it, much like you. You had that experience so that you knew it existed. So I was working toward getting back on that path where I felt connected to all things, or felt creative, or I wasn't existing in this hellish realm of all the terrible things that I did or it was done to me. And it became this idea of wanting fulfillment again. I wanted to kind of just be on the tip of the iceberg at best, just to get out of the hell realm. But one of the fortunate things that happened to me was that I met my Taoist teacher. And she's the 19th generation lineage holder of Shinton Mujimin Taoism, which started in the 10th century. So she gave me tools to cultivate my body and my mind that helped me get out of the hell realm, start to exist as a human, and then started to cultivate fulfillment. And when I had those basic needs met, there's so much depth to what she teaches that I was able to start to experience a non-dualistic state of mind for longer periods of time. Instead of just for an afternoon during my meditation practice, it may be for a few weeks, or maybe for a few months. And then during the pandemic, it certainly was what it felt like for a year solid, with a fringe into a year and a half of being in this state of being. And I'm still trying to look for words to even describe what that's like. But one of the things that comes to mind, it's kind of like you spend so much time strategizing to have the things that you need to fulfill yourself or feel satisfied. But when you're fully invested in just the present moment, those things take care of itself in a way that you can never orchestrate or contrive. And because I've had these tastes like you with that musical experience and the mushrooms, and you can't forget that that happened. And so it just started to expand more and more to where it becomes a little bit more frustrating for me to not be like that. Where I have to answer questions because someone's being discursive about a TV show or something, when really I'm not really watching the TV show. I'm kind of just in front of the TV with my eyes open in stillness. And, you know, it's a distraction sometimes to experience those moments of the tip of the iceberg with most folks that are not expansive in their consciousness. And it becomes almost like something I want to grab and have, but that doesn't really lead to experiencing it. There is a letting go, whether it's mushrooms, whether it's some form of trance state, or whether it's cultivating the mind to abide in stillness, which is my current path. And it's it provides so much satisfaction that I think fails in comparison to having all these things I used to think were important, like a hotshot career or a certain type of lifestyle. It seems like all that fails in comparison to the just being attentive to what is when it's happening. And that is fulfillment within and of itself. And the things that happen that you think are like coincidental, I mean, that whole idea of coincidence seems foolish, because it seems like when you're in the moment, everything is that. That mirror, like you were speaking of, it's just so, like you wonder what came first, the chicken or the egg, or it's like, did I think that, and then it happened immediately, or was it because something was going to happen soon, and then I thought that, and then that becomes closer and closer together to this, just everything's happening perfectly, and your thoughts are coherent with the doing or the experiencing without any contrived effort.
It's interesting, you know, the more you kind of just let experience flow and really surrender to the moment, those synchronicities, those profound coincidences seem to happen, and it seems indicative that they probably happen all the time. We just aren't paying attention. We're too busy, caught up in, or at least for me, I'm caught up in my work, I'm caught up in my chasing the next goal, desire, etc., living my life as that tip of the iceberg. But when I can pull myself out of that, it just seems like life flows in exactly the way it's supposed to, and the way you need it to have a rich, fulfilling experience. And there really isn't much more fulfilling than those non-dual moments of just being. And it's a shame. I think we're very conditioned from birth to look outside of ourselves for fulfillment, whether it's through other people or substances or entertainment. But we kind of have everything we need, right? Like with our just body. I mean, assuming we have the basic hierarchy of needs met, like food, oxygen, shelter and stuff. But you know, you have those kind of basics. Don't you feel like you kind of got everything you need to be, I wouldn't even say happy, I guess, because it kind of transcends happiness. It's just like fulfillment.
I think that's dead on. I think the whole idea of thinking creates the separation immediately. So when you become still, it's within the stillness and the absence of thoughts that joy and peace happen. And that's what we are. Essentially, that's what we are. And then thoughts come in, however subtle or however ambitious, to remove our attention from that inner bliss that is essentially what animates us. And I find it, makes me laugh when I think of the time before my head injury. I had all these ambitions and goals of being an artist. And I thought that the more that I paid attention and studied and painted and took classes and workshops and all those things, that was going to just make me better, But actually, it's really dangerous because I became blind to my environment because I was so focused on what I wanted to achieve. I didn't realize that the people around me weren't trustworthy, or they didn't always have their best intentions. And I couldn't see it because all I was focused on was hyper thinking of my goals and what I wanted. And sometimes things that I wanted for those people.
Yeah.
And so when it became more prevalent to be more free-flowing or still, or let go or surrender to those ambitions of the thinking mind, I could see more clearly. And that sometimes it wasn't about something I would do, but maybe something I would remove that would create greater fulfillment, greater art in my case, because that is something I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And it was almost like weeding a garden that I didn't even know had so many weeds before. I was too blinded by just smelling flowers that I wanted to smell to realize that it was a mess.
Yeah.
And then by cultivating that and creating a lifestyle that supported a more of a being mentality, it was like this self-supporting system. Like you mentioned, things that we already have with us. It's like these smart houses that collect rainwater, that go into an indoor garden, that go into the plumbing system. And, it's like we have this like what's the term that you might call that?
Self-sustaining.
Self-sustaining, yeah. And so when you can create a lifestyle through that clarity of stillness, it's just easier to access all that stuff we have inside because you're not, people need jobs and raising a family takes tremendous responsibility, and it is a privilege to have all those things in our lives. And however, we're able to spend some time seeking clarity through stillness and accessing those inner gifts that we have. It makes them more available for us when we have more time. And maybe it takes a little bit, like to any skill, it takes some time to become familiar with.
Yeah, it's not an overnight process to, even the Buddha had to, go on his journey and struggle until he sat under the tree and reached enlightenment, right? So it's not like an overnight thing for everybody. And, I mention enlightenment like it's some sort of goal, but that's kind of the wrong way to think about it too. That's almost like a trap. If like you're pushing for enlightenment, that in itself says that you're not enough as you are.
Well, yeah, but I also think it's worthy to acknowledge that there's an evolution of consciousness or a refinement of consciousness. Like there's some kind of sense of blueprint, because it doesn't happen overnight. We may have these moments through trance states or mushrooms or something that gives us this instantaneous satora. Yet there is like this refinement where we start off, where our interests are really getting our needs met. Food and shelter, and these things are really important. And then we realize that they're so important, and our interests maybe are more into protecting those things. And then as we refine our consciousness even more, we might realize, some of the best ways to ensure our needs are met and that we stay safe is to maybe like go to the gym and work on our bodies, because we realize that if we're flexible and strong and healthy, that we'll be able to protect our needs.
Yeah.
And then even that becomes, I guess that's sort of rigid. And as our consciousness refines even more, you might be into learning new skills and feeling like the acquiring new skill sets allow us to be more valuable in one way or another, to have all those needs protected and taken care of. And then even from that point, I think there's an aspect of interest where you surrender all of that, and being more like the sky is the interest, which would be a sense of enlightenment, where you're abiding in stillness. You're realizing that by being in a non-dualistic state and fully present in the moment, you're safe and getting all your needs met, and you're entertained, regarding, and you run out and take a workshop necessarily. Everything's fulfilling.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a spectrum on that road toward enlightenment, where we could enjoy the refinement, and to know it, like you said, it doesn't happen overnight, and you fall off the path sometimes because we're in a certain aspect of that spectrum.
Yeah. I love that you just said enjoy the refinement. It's like Alan Watts, who I think we're both fond of, once said something to the effect of, the point of music isn't to rush through the music and get to the end of the song, right? It's to enjoy, to dance while the music's playing and enjoy the process of the music, as opposed to arriving at some end place. Now, certainly, the grand finale of enlightenment is a great place to arrive at, but yeah, like, enjoy the process of raising your consciousness and enjoy it no matter where you are. And yeah, if you fall off the path, hey, you're human. It's okay. Welcome back. You're on it again, and you figured something out. You were stuck in some place, and we all have been stuck in places from a consciousness perspective. And congrats, you got yourself out, and you're back on the path towards more expanded consciousness, I guess.
And ignorance is bliss too. I think on that spectrum, it's fun to be stuck in one of those spots sometimes, because you can be happily fulfilled with not taking full responsibility for yourself. Like a magic trick, it's so great to be entertained by it. And then when you learn how to do it, you can no longer be entertained by it anymore. Now you know the mechanics, and now you're responsible for your own amazement, because that trick isn't going to do it for you anymore. So if you're stuck somewhere on the spectrum, it's like, good for you. Enjoy that, because there's a lot of letting go through the refinement of consciousness, where you're no longer really leaning on things to entertain you anymore. Yeah. The full responsibility is on you to dance. And we do have our friends that say, hey, come on, let's go have a great conversation, or they help support you on that rapture, and which is I think a true blessing. But there's a lot of loneliness as well, where you're now responsible, because you didn't just get a taste of expansiveness. You got a whole meal. You got weeks of eating this stuff, and that's what you want. Yeah. And it's not necessarily found in these groups in society anymore.
No, it's definitely a lonely path, and it's not to say that, and we're all on it, right? Like, we're all, whether we are aware of it or not, that's what we're all working towards, is that nirvana, satori, heightened consciousness experience. I mean, people say that we're all God dressed in drag. We're just God pretending we're not God, and we're on the journey back to wholeness. But we all take different paths and different times to reach back there. So yeah, it's definitely lonely, because only you as an individual and I, an individual, can kind of get myself there. But we have helpers along the way. And it's just, I guess, probably important to realize that no one else can do it for you. So you can't lean on someone to, people can help boost you, accelerate you a little bit, but you can't like cling to people as if they're going to be the thing that gives you the ultimate fulfillment.
Yeah, and it reminds me of my Taoist teacher, Eva Wong. She doesn't really uh, get in the way of your natural study of life. She may have exercises that you could do, and if but you have to kind of come to your own wanting to do those exercises.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of Taoists don't get in the way of you wherever you are in that spectrum. You find your own way toward whatever interest that you have, and I think there would be that evolution to get back to godliness in a sense, or if, because I do like that you mentioned that we're all God and drag, but to be able to surrender all the false self, all the ego,
Yeah.
and to experience as if you are God looking through the set of eyes at the creation. And then it does make me want to laugh a little bit when you think of all these things I've spent so much time complaining about. that it was really just complaining about myself the whole time, and I could have not done that. You know,
it's hilarious.
It's
actually.
hilarious
when you can have those like glimpses of lucidity and see it that way. It does make everything so much lighter and a little bit more comical. Like we're just playing trick on ourselves, and if there's something to complain about, we're complaining about ourselves, really.
Right. We have this moment of enlightenment as we're discussing it, and then after we're done and we leave, I'm going to go do something really stupid with somebody. I know I will.
Yeah.
I'll get into an argument or
no doubt
fall from grace, you know, and it's this, you know, and I'll be completely absorbed by it too. It'll only be moments later that I realize, oh, what an ass I was in that moment, you know, and then the humility that comes in, which is great. And then the gratitude, which is even better, that I have this opportunity to experience myself this way and choose. Like there's a samurai saying, fall down 7 times, get up 8. You know, so it's like, okay, great, humbled again.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do these things that I've learned to get me into a space where I'm a little bit more fulfilled is a part of a good word.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just some kind of ego want. But
well, that's interesting. It's certainly a process of fading in, fading out, but it seems like kind of coming back to what we said, we're all on the journey where we can maybe stay phased into that perspective or that state of being more and more and more as we work our way up the journey.
Like a radio, right? So almost like you kind of get this radio station that's it's playing something kind of cool, and you kind of adjust to get into that, so you can hear the song. But sometimes there's static of life, right?
Yeah.
But we can learn to navigate toward the music.
Yeah, we can fine tune and fine tune. So I'm curious. You know, and this is probably familiar to you in some sense, but like we have to like. So the Freemasons will talk about like, and there's a bunch of different metaphors for the journey of consciousness. The Freemasons talk about like the journey of the spinal cord, Jacob's ladder, as it's talked about in the Bible, where you have like 33 vertebrae in your spinal cord. So you start your journey where your consciousness is at your base, or like the chakra system. There's 7 chakras, right? Where you know it's like base chakra is like survival, and then all the way up to the 100,000 petal lotus at the top of your head. But the idea is that every step up the spinal cord is a stage, and you move from like a fear-based living to a more steady state of what we're talking about being
Surrendering.
Yeah.
Or the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, and the ancient Egyptians had this concept too. If you ever go, have you been to Egypt?
No.
If you go to the temples, you'll see what's called like the Jed pillar. It's these columns in the temples. And actually, what's really cool is that these temples were built to imitate the human body, which people don't realize because people aren't usually generally looking at them from above. but people suggest that they're built like the human body, and that back in the days, initiates were brought into these temples, and you'd read the passages on the walls with the priest class. It would teach you a lesson, and that was to help you make your journey up your spinal cord or into up your chakra system into these higher levels of consciousness, so that you were more equipped to live everyday waking life in the state of I am the Godhead here on earth. Yeah, I am. I am as simple as that. Exactly. But the Jed pillar is cool too. Like all the pillars, the columns that support these buildings, you'll see at the top uh, the lotus petals open up. And so I don't know. I don't know why I brought this up, but I just thought it was interesting that there's like physiology in all these different wisdom traditions, whether it's Egyptian, Freemasonry, Hindu culture. Does that exist within the Taoist tradition, I guess?
Yeah, in fact, to prepare for this conversation last night, I did a practice that is essentially that, where you bring energy to the top of your head. And from that, you get more clarity.
Yeah.
And then it's not anything of this particular practice isn't anything that's of a permanent stay there. You bring it back down.
Yeah.
You cycle it through. But it's important to do that for health, longevity, or as they say, to become immortal. Just would be have a lot of energy throughout the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel it's an important thing to do, and it's interesting as you're speaking of other cultures. I'm more or less just familiar with the Taoist perspective on it, and how important the spine is.
Yeah.
To keep it flexible, and for that reason, so that you can have a healthy exchange of energy in your system.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this whole stuff we're talking about, our state of being, the nervous system is like the most, it's your brain and your nerves, and that all interacts with the rest of your body. If that is running amok, you can't be still, right? If you're just firing, and you're...
It makes me think about my story a little bit.
Yeah.
So if I was this 12-year-old kid that meditated a lot up until I was about almost 40 when I had my head injury.
Yeah.
The Western medicine saved my life and patched me up. And if you took an X-ray, they said, you're fine.
Yeah.
But on a neurological level, I was not fine. On an emotional level, I was not fine.
Yeah.
And I remember writing on my bathroom mirror my thoughts of my own. So I would see it every day in hopes that I could make that some sense of truth. But neurologically, it was like a thunderstorm in my brain that had its own algorithm. I couldn't predict when it would hit me.
Yeah.
And so it was through Qigong, which is what my teacher Eva teaches. Would you cultivate your body and mind? That life energy that was circulated up my spine, throughout my body, into my brain, the cerebral fluid that was brought up my spine, that nourished all those neural connections, that began to give me a sense of control on my thoughts.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I'm just talking like on a basic level, because I was kind of insane, the amount of thoughts that could just come and go in any way they wanted to. To be able to meditate was impossible.
Yeah.
So through all that Qigong, I was able to get a neurology set up that allowed me to meditate again, which would be like starting all over, trying to tame the mind.
Yeah.
So that thoughts became something that didn't dominate my actions. They're non-attachment.
You don't have to take action on every thought that pops in your head.
Right. You could see it as like a cloud passing by.
Yeah.
And that gave me a sense of separation from that. And then through just continual practice, like it's a lifestyle. For me, it has to be something I do every day.
Yeah.
Just keep my balance, to keep my neurology set up. But the more that's promoted, the more peace, because the more stillness,
Yeah.
because the neurology is calm. But it was really kind of interesting to because I was say 40 when I had my head injury, so I already kind of had this blinded expectation of what life is.
Are you comfortable sharing what like your head injury was? Because like people listening to this
Oh,
probably
sure.
won't understand. We don't have to. But if
Oh
you
yeah,
want
no, I whatever is interesting.
Yeah,
I
mean,
kind of forget to talk about it.
no, it's all right. I mean, it's there's a lot more to you than your head injury. I think it would be show people too, because we're talking. One thing we're talking about the sweetness of being in consciousness, but also there's hardship in life too, and I think this is an example of real hardship.
Joseph Kimball talks about the hero's journey.
Yeah.
And the blueprint is the hero, the main character,
yeah.
is walking down a path. They tragically fall off the path. They're changed, and when they go back on the path, they're no longer that same person that was walking the path.
Yeah.
Right, and that's kind of my story.
Yeah.
So at 39, I was a web designer. And I was very happy with my life at that time. But I was training for a mountain bike race. In the very last evening after work that I was going to train, before the race, 15 minutes into the bike ride, I started to feel dizzy. And I hadn't even gotten into the woods yet. Still on the side of the road, and I remember no longer being able to like move my hands, and I shook my head a little bit more, and all of a sudden I realized I couldn't really move my legs anymore. Yeah. What I didn't know at the time was I had a brain aneurysm while I was on my bike. So I was able to just kind of like lean off the road and did this crazy ninja tumble into the woods. And my training partner came back, which was really great because normally he would just wait for me to catch up to him.
Yeah.
But he came back to check on me, and everything went black. And I just said, take me to the hospital. So 20 hours of brain surgery later, they patched me up. But I was paralyzed. I needed to be in a wheelchair for a few months. I had to relearn all your basic skills. It's kind of like your modem when you unplug it, wait 10 seconds and plug it back in. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like one of those deals. It was pretty literally trippy because I couldn't walk anymore. And as a result, I had to go on disability and take a lot of time of rest. And during that time is where all these changes have taken place, of the awareness of life and what's important and what's fulfilling. Mm-hmm. And meeting my Taoist teacher, being able to create a lifestyle that once allowed me to freely walk around in the woods and be back on this path of feeling fulfilled as a human being. Yeah. No longer in Dante's hellish realms. Inferno, is that what it is?
Dante's Inferno, and then it's like got the 7 rungs of hell. Or not, there's there's more than one. Yeah, like levels of hell.
I've been to all of them so many times. They just let myself out.
You got the VIP.
I just show my pass. Like, oh, hi, Mr. Kimball.
Yeah, welcome back.
Welcome back. Stay as long as you like, or leave right now.
Yeah.
And so that was literally life changing. I'm very fortunate to have survived, and very unfortunate to find Eva Wong to give me these techniques to be able to ride a bike again, or have a healthy relationship again, and to be around trustworthy people. And that was a big change too. There's so many, my interests changed and my priorities changed so much because of that. It was really hard to let go of what was so familiar, mm-hmm. and really challenging to gain back what I felt were basic needs or skills. Yeah. But then in hindsight, and I don't even want to say this because I was so pissed off the idea I was going to have to go through this, but life is better than I thought.
Different.
It's different, but even within the different, it's better than it was when I could work full time or was maybe dynamic in a particular way.
Yeah.
I thought that was the height of the pyramid, you know? And now I realize that it's really on that interface of the bottom of the iceberg and the water where there's very little ego, very little to even talk about. There's nothing to talk about. It's just an experience, and I would not be able to have such a tangible experience of that lifestyle had it not been for all the tragedy,
Sure.
that took place. So, uh, which leads me to really meeting you,
Yeah.
because of friends that are in that very trustworthy circle that have stayed intact with me, introduced us.
Yeah. I mean, it comes right back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, if you just kind of start doing you, and by doing you, I think a lot of it is taking care of your basic needs and trying to be in that state of being as much as possible. The streams of existence pull you towards people you're supposed to interact with. And it might be for a reason, a season, a lifetime, but the more you surrender, it seems like you're brought into interaction with people that will help your journey. And that's what I view our connection, and certainly the people that brought us together. We're in their cycling studio right now. That's a staple of my health and well-being, and the people that run it, John and Kim, are phenomenally wonderful people who bring joy to not just me or my wife, but this entire community. And they hooked us up, and now I get to have this super fulfilling interactions with you where we can geek out about things that, let's face it, most people don't like to geek out about.
That's so true.
Yeah.
We're very lucky that way.
Yeah.
And it is that whole, like, could we have ever planned anything like this and have it happen? I don't know, maybe, but the idea of just doing us, doing you, that leads to this fulfilling experience is fun, and there's joy in it, because it's, oh my God, this happened,
And it's so unforced.
It's so unforced.
Yeah.
I think that's the key.
Yeah.
Unforced.
Yes.
And like, maybe there's an analogy too with a stream or whitewater rafting. If you fall out of the boat and you just kind of allow yourself to float, go with the water, versus struggling to try to get to the side. It's two different experiences. One's way more exhausting, and the other one you might check out the clouds and realize it's sunny, and all these birds are chirping, and the other one you're just like gulping water and tired,
fighting for your freaking life.
Fighting for your life.
Yeah.
So the whole surrender, it's kind of like having life support you on, and trusting that it does bring you to the people that you'll be more inspired to hang out with, versus this strategic. I'll get this if I do this, type of thing, which is finite. It's limited to its potential, and then you just cut the strings and you just, and there's all that trust. Then it's fulfilling without trying, and all these little weird things can happen. I will sometimes say these obscure lines or words, evening during dinner, the TV's on, and then right after I say it, it's spoken on TV. And it just makes you laugh. Whereas the person before the head injury may have thought hypnosis was cool because maybe you could be psychic and maybe you could predict the future and have this egoic command of what's going to happen in life.
Yeah.
And then the reality of the experience of that is like when I'm not trying to do anything, is when something like that would happen. There's no ego of wanting to control anything. It just pops into my head. I'll say something really offbeat, and then it happens to match up in a unique way with some TV programming that I had no control over. But it's really the no control over it. There's no ego involved with these hits.
No, no. In fact, those hits really pop up when the ego is tamed, in my experience, for
Yeah.
sure.
Uh, exactly, and that's part of that laughter. The funny thing of being a human.
Yeah. I don't know where I read this, but somebody said like those synchronicities are God's way of winking at you. And when I say God, I'm not talking about, you know, fire and brimstone, the bearded white guy floating around on a cloud. I mean
Yeah.
just like the totality of existence, the fundamental energy, or
The
state.
ocean,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
and that's how I interpret when you say
yeah,
that. It is a nice word to
Mhm.
be used for the sustaining energy of life,
yeah,
which I would also sometimes use the term consciousness, refined
yeah.
consciousness. So that to me makes a lot of sense. Um, it's just a word,
Yeah.
but
It has a lot of meaning to a lot of people, though, too.
and there's a lot of respect that goes with that word,
Yeah.
for sure. But what's that? It's this Taoist saying with a finger pointing to the moon.
Mhm.
You know, and a word like that is like a finger,
Yeah.
but really, I think the objective is the moon.
Of course.
So it's to have Christ consciousness or non-dualistic uh, consciousness or perspective, or that it's a word that points to some kind of ultimate refinement of self,
Yeah.
or consciousness, which would have dissolved the self. In that, I can't remember where some of these sayings came from, but the witness that witnesses you through my eyes is the same witness that witnesses me through your eyes.
Yeah.
In the sense that we're all God and drag, in that
Yes.
sense. And the ego kind of takes that supreme frequency and just dulls it down a lot, so I can be me.
Well, and so, I've heard it expressed, and I think this is a wonderful way of looking at it. Like, if you are God, or consciousness, or in the sense that you are everything that exists, that inherently means that there is nothing outside of you. So you're it. So that's inherently lonely. If you're
Right.
the only thing there is,
Right.
and you can't look over to a friend like a Ken and say, "Hey, what's up, man?" You're just by yourself. So the only thing to do would be to go inside yourself and play that you're all these different things and processes and being. You get lost in yourself so that you forget that fundamental original loneliness of being all there is.
And there's the cosmology within Taoism, where there was that kind of emptiness, and then that loneliness. So then there's something that becomes separate from that. So now there's this duality.
Yes.
And then from that, maybe yin and yang was more separateness, and then that splits into this whole ladder toward creation.
Yeah.
But it's the reversal of that, to go back toward the void, or toward that lonely perspective, realizing that you are the totality of all of that. But it does feel like it's the benefit maybe if you are everything, which a hologram essentially is too.
Yes.
You take a hologram. I think if I could pronounce his name right, Itzhak Bentov. He wrote "Stalking the Wild Pendulum." Okay. I think back in the '60s or early '70s. But he had this really great illustration of taking a pizza pan and throwing 3 pebbles in it, and then flash freezing it. Okay. And then if you took it and you broke it, and took one little piece and illuminated it, it would contain all of the information of the original pan, which is kind of like this hologram. And we're all kind of like fragments, in a sense, of this totality of consciousness, or God.
Yeah.
And if we're illuminated in particular ways, we are everything within creation. We're just part of that vibration that ripples out and creates us, which I think is an empowering thought for It's inspiring.
It is, you know, yeah, I've studied, I'm not a scholar of religion, but I've dove into enough different traditions that all kind of have this similar thought process of like, you know, in like Christianity, people talk about Jesus, the being, whether he was a real human being or not, saying that I'm the son of God, but so is everybody else. It wasn't just like exclusive to him, and that
Mm.
like we're all. It's just like another way of saying we're all the Godhead living here, or in Judaism and Kabbalism specifically,
Mm.
they say that, you know, the Godhead is the original light, and we are these fragments of that light. That existence came about, and that light was contained in little vessels, and that those vessels broke, and we are the shattered light
Mm.
from those vessels. And then there's like, I don't know, I think it's the Hindu traditions where they talk about Brahman, the
Mm.
god who is sleeping, and we are the dream characters
Mm.
of the Godhead. All that to say, these are different kind of metaphors, at least in my mind, and I'm not trying to offend anybody who's watching this, you know, if you have different interpretations, but they're all metaphors basically saying the same thing, that like we are these little vessels, these little holograms of the totality, and we have the potential to actually, because we're a hologram of the totality, and this is all metaphor too, but I think they're helpful metaphors. We can recognize that in our everyday life, that we have the ability to grasp and experience being that small aspect of the totality. And when we can do that in regular life, life is so much richer than when we don't understand
Absolutely, I would have to say amen. Namaste. But it also brings in a sense this full circle of that moment you were at the concert,
Yeah.
taking mushrooms and having this expanded sense of consciousness, and then how, you know, all these years of study or curiosity leading you down this path of being able to articulate that. It's kind of cool how that moment created all of this interest for you to understand the mechanics and the diversity of sacred paths that all lead to up the same mountain. And I think what most mystics, sages, what have you, would say is those who have truly transcended, um, you know, they do let go of the path that they walked on to get to that point, because they realize that that fulfillment is no longer, you know, the rituals of those particular paths have been transcended. Now they're in that space of consciousness, which is in of itself its own justification.
that. Yeah.
You know, and then, you know, like I think of sayings where if you put Buddha, Jesus, um, Muhammad, thank you, and all the great Lao Tzu, you get all these great badasses all in the same room. They're all going to agree on the same exact thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but then you bring in the disciples, and then there's conflict.
Yeah.
Because they haven't had that refinement of consciousness that the masters have.
It's attachment to the figurehead, and maybe the paths that the figurehead took, as that's the only way, and that's the way for everybody, and I've got to force other people to recognize that that's the only way.
And I think there's some benefits to that too. Like Confucius would say that it's the rituals that keep societies and families together. So there's this really, on the spectrum of consciousness, when you're trying to protect getting your needs met.
Yeah.
You know, you do rely on these rituals to have that holistic integrity of making sure you exist and can take care of your family.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's great. It's just that it's a stepping stone towards something that may be more illuminating than a rigid ritual.
Right. And ritual is, you know, it's so crazy. You know, ebbs and flows of this stuff, right? Like you need ritual to move on, but you also need to be able to let go of certain ritual at certain points to continue the journey as well. So it's like the yin and yang. Like, yeah, you need this right now, but you might not need it forever.
Yeah, I think Robert Adams, he's a non-dualistic teacher. He speaks of that. Where there's a transcendence of all of it. None of it's needed anymore when you're self-realized. I wouldn't know.
Yeah, you
but,
would be
but
both.
it feels pretty right on.
Yeah. No, and I think that's the thing for me. I'm glad you said that. I wouldn't know because like we've clearly been there, right, and have gone back to that state. I think for me, I thought that the mushroom path was the only way to get there, but and that was my initial way of trying to get back to the mountaintop or to be the whole ocean and learn, like we're just talking about, there's tons of different paths, and I had to let go of that at one point because that was really just my peek behind the curtain or my 101 class, like my big debrief. Hey, Ryan, there's a lot more to you in existence than what you normally think. But guess what? You can't stay in 101 kindergarten or 101 class forever. Like if you want to keep going on this journey, you let things go. Yeah.
For me, it was more cannabis than anything else.
Okay.
That always seemed to kind of grease the wheels, and then that became limited.
Yeah.
And then I had to stop.
Yeah.
And it's tough to let go sometimes, but then you realize it was a crutch. Yeah. As much of it provided so much benefit for expansiveness or lucidity of consciousness to kind of free things up a little bit.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably one of the more important things, whether it's a ritual or a substance, just to kind of jar something loose.
Yeah.
So you're not in this rigid, fixed, robotic, ghost-like experience of day in and day out. That you actually are able to pop out and see that there's a multitude of experiences, and how much fun it is to be on that journey of learning those things, to have these satora, these mini awakenings. And the pandemic really for me was so awesome that I just had, when I think of what a church might be for me, it was really being in my studio during the pandemic when I would not be bothered by really anything. Yeah. And the stillness that came from that was just quite profound. But then also, it's not realistic because the world's now moving again. And, sometimes it's like there's a saying, you're not healed, you're just not triggered. It's like you're not enlightened, you're just not around a lot of challenges.
Right.
Because I feel like these masters we're talking about have mastered consciousness so that they can be around idiots, or that get their needs met in ways that doesn't stress them out. Whereas we get glimpses of these things, which is awesome. But it's like going to the gym every day in life. How present can we be in what the present moment is giving us?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said that, right? So it's like, I think we talked about this too last time. It's like, you think you're enlightened out in the woods, go pop into society for a little bit and see how long
somebody
it lasts.
cut you off when you drive.
Right, yeah.
How enlightened are you then?
Yeah. Exactly.
And there are some people that are so good about those things, and it's really, I'm always in awe when I see examples of people with extreme patience. It's really awesome to see that. But I'm happy to have my little mini hits every once in a while that make me feel happy and keep on the grind.
Yeah. No, I like retreating into myself and then carrying something out of that, and then hopefully putting something out into the world as a result of that retreating into myself. Like as long as we're here and embodied, and I don't want to be just blissed out by myself all the time. I certainly want that. Um, but I also feel like that it's kind of the whole concept of other people help you on the journey. And like, I guess I want to help other people on the journey, even though I certainly can't help that much or help that many people. I feel like, well, I guess this podcast is a way of that. Like, this is something for me where I feel like when I'm preparing for these, or I'm, learning about people, reading their books, or meditating, and then I do an episode and I can put it out in the world. Like, I love that. And I wanted to bring that up, not so much to talk about me, but like, you seem to do that with your artwork, which is sitting behind us here on the wall. Do you get, you know, do you make art just as something to do, or do you do it because, I guess, why do you do it? And can you, we haven't got
first
into
of all,
your art at all.
I really like that when you said you retreat into yourself, kind of grab something and bring it into the world. I think that's the metaphor for my creative process, for sure.
Okay.
And I've had teachers that would say that people who just want to be blissed out all the time, it's not good for the world. It's self-serving in the sense of that person, because you get to just be blissed out. But it's the whole artistic journey for me has been really interesting. I remember I used to sell art supplies when I was in college, and I went to a state school for graphic design. I wanted to be a commercial designer, and there was a fine art college nearby, and they, if you asked them to paint you a picture of an apple, you don't know what you were going to get. They were just so off the deep end. And I'm like, no, to be a commercial designer, you've got to do what people need you to do and everything.
Yeah.
So not so much a hippy dippy approach.
Right.
And then after the head injury, though, things changed for me. And right now, it's like if somebody asked me to do a painting for them, I'm just not going to really be able to do it. It's going to just, if I did it, it would take too long, or it'd be too tight, it won't really look great. But like, for instance, like that painting of Stevie Vai, I did because of how much I love Kim and John. And it was just that feeling and that retreating into myself. And it was when they first had the studio going, and I could see the type of artwork Kim had on the walls, and to have a feeling of what could I do for friends that I cared about. Retreat into myself, you get this idea, and I don't even know how Stevie Ray Vaughan came into it. Came like in a dream state or a trance state.
Yeah.
And that is kind of the metaphor for any successful art that I do now. It would have to be inspired by wanting to make somebody laugh, or wanting to show somebody I respect them, or someone who just needs to feel better, depending upon the scenario. And then it's almost like I'm painting for my subconscious, not so much for my intellect or my need to be some kind of creative ninja. I often don't even know what it would be that I'll be doing next. And now I'm like one of those hippy dippy college students. I went to the fine arts, and I can't even believe that I'm even saying these words when I say it, because I was so rigid in my ability to do anything anybody needed me to draw. I could draw it, and it would look exactly like whatever the hell they wanted. To now it would be like more suggestive.
Yeah.
Or if I feel like it even, which again is horrific when I say it out loud, but it really is where I find my greatest art comes from, greatest happiness, is when I'm doing it because I'm just doing it, because it feels right to do it, and it kind of does it itself.
Yeah.
The other day I went to the Gill River Trail in Franconia.
Yeah.
That's actually where I had my brain aneurysm.
Okay.
And the other day I went there, I was all psyched to be in nature, set up my easel, and just a small little 5x7 I wanted to paint. And I get all set up, and I realize I don't have my paint with me. I only had like one tube of Payne's Gray. I didn't have any water. I forgot all my stuff. I had a paintbrush. But then I had a stream right near me. So I filled up a little cup with some water, took that one color, and in that moment, surrendered what I wanted to do, that I was comfortable doing, that I felt like I could do, to something I didn't even know if I would be able to do this or not. But I drove a half an hour to get there. It's not that far to walk in, but I did take some time to find the right spot. And it was so awesome to just kind of let go.
Yeah.
And I was looking at that painting this morning, and it came out great, with all these limitations. Mm-hmm. But I just let go of what I thought needed to be done. And in that sense, it was kind of like, well, the present moment decided what it is that I was going to do. And then the playfulness of not knowing. And then having the surprise success, because I was thinking it was just going to be a hot mess. Yeah. I was a little upset at first. And then now it's encouraging to be more surrendering to my tools.
Yeah.
Like that the ritualistic aspects of the mountain. Mm-hmm. It feels very freeing, where I almost feel like I don't want anything. I want to walk into the woods. I want to find some birch bark. I want to find some dirt, something fluffy that I can mix the dirt with and slap it on the birch bark. And what will happen? I don't know. But it's like surrendering to all the ritual tools of painting to be in the present moment of nature.
Yeah.
And maybe being pleasantly surprised that something was created out of nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of exciting, but you have to let go of a lot of things that you rely on, I think, to achieve an outcome.
It's interesting. The way I look at what you're saying is kind of like, you go into this experience as coming back to the tip of the iceberg. I'm the tip of the iceberg, and I'm going to make this drawing. And then instead, you say, after, maybe a few minutes of getting over that you don't have everything under control as the tip of the iceberg, I'm just going to be the ocean and let the ocean flow through me, the tip of the iceberg, and I'll be the instrument for the ocean, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what comes out. And it's just like the slightest standard deviation of a change of perspective or tuning of that radio station that, takes what could have been a really bad situation. You could have ruined your day. You could have huffed and puffed and walked off and not created everything.
That was
the
close.
painting. Yeah, close. Well, I mean, it's superhuman to be close. Yeah, I don't blame you. I get the same way when, things don't go according to plan. But, I guess through your rituals and your patterns, you've conditioned yourself to not be so reactive. Take a second, maybe breathe it out, and then you had this awesome experience, and you have a piece of artwork that's fulfilling to you that came out of it.
Yeah, and that is encouraging to want to do it again. Mm-hmm. But really the successful part wasn't the doing, it was the being present in the moment with whatever was around.
Yeah.
Because it's funny how the mind wants to take that pattern and repeat it. Like, all right, I'm just going to go out with that brush, with that canvas, with that paint color, but really that doesn't have to be so rigid either. Mm. But I think the piece that is important is the just not having too much expectation, knowing how to just be there just enough to playfully allow something to happen. That was the best piece, was the not contriving.
Yeah. It's kind of like, coming back to music, since we've got it all behind us. Favorite band, Fish, the frontman, the guitar guy, Trey. He's like super gifted at the guitar, but it's really like, at this point, it seems like he did all this year of playing and trying to play to tune himself as the instrument. And that was necessary, much like, I guess, learning some skills with the paintbrushes. But then, he just becomes the instrument. So you do some of the baseline stuff that's necessary, and then the environment and the situation takes over, and then that's what's driving the music going forward. And so it kind of sounds like, hey, you've got the baseline of being an artist taken care of. Like, yeah, you've put some work into it, and now you can kind of reap the fruits of making do with what the environment or the
Jamming.
situation. Yeah, jamming.
You know,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
one of the pieces that was so helpful to understand that as an artist was to be a musician, and I played harmonica for a while.
Okay.
Because it's a pretty quick instrument to get some basics down.
Yeah.
And when I look back at that, it wasn't necessarily trying to learn like a particular song. Um, Stevie Wonder is amazing, but when I look back at that, it's sometimes a lot of headache. But it was when 4-5 people would get together that you never played music with before, and that there's this flow that takes place because you're just listening, you're responding to what you're hearing at that moment when you're hearing it, and you're playing off of that.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there may not be a lot of consciousness knowing what you're going to play off that. But those are the moments where most magical, and what I miss the most about playing music is not so much being at a bar, but being in the backyard.
Yeah.
And having that flow, genius music. And I never thought that was possible before, that musicians that hadn't rehearsed together could play music so amazing, that had so much but it was really based on lucidity, you know, in present moment listening. And I think music is a great metaphor, or not so much even a metaphor. It's an art. It's a vehicle. It's another path.
Yeah.
All in with of itself. I suppose, for me, to be honest, I use it as a metaphor because painting has always been or visual art has been more of a primary for me. But it expresses that flow state in a way that I never could before with paint and art. So music is just those jams. It's sublime. It takes you outside of yourself, and it's this kind of aesthetic arrest that takes place where so much. It's beautiful and magical.
It is. No, I love it. I love that. You're a man of many talents. I wish that I was playing. I really should try and figure out some sort of instrument. I'm like the tambourine shaker in the background, way stage left that you can't see behind the curtain.
Well, you know, when you're a harmonica player, you also get stuck with the tambourine quite a bit.
Right,
you know, especially in this area where you got to be useful. You know?
Yeah.
But the tambourine is, you know, just for whatever that's worth, that's not much different than a shamanic rattle. And there was a group of guys in Vermont that I would get together regularly with, and you know, there was a lot of beer drinking and whatnot. But there were songs that they were playing that they didn't want to tell me what key they were in, and I didn't know it very well, so I just pick up the tambourine.
Yeah.
I remember this happened often, that I would just find this chicka 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 chicka, and I'll close my eyes because it was too hard for me to keep my eyes open to maintain that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I'm walking in a monastery, and I could smell incense, and I could see these amazing people doing these amazing things, and it was really interesting. And then all of a sudden, I'm back in the living room, and these guys are just being knuckleheads, you know, and they don't know where I just went. And I would go, I don't think I should tell them either. And I probably won't happen to get, and there I am again in some other transcendent experience just through using that damn tambourine.
All right, well, I'm never writing off the tambourine.
Never underestimate the power. And there's some great videos too of people doing instruction, and they just there's so many different patterns and rhythms.
Yeah.
You basically have a shamanic drum / rattle right in your hand. And it's badass.
Yeah.
And to me, it's a little bit stressful because the consistency of holding the beat is actually what sends you off into the trance. But it's not my natural thing. Like, to be a drummer isn't, like, Kim was always pretty good at playing drums. Yeah. The ability to keep that constant rhythm. I'm more of like, I want to do a different pattern.
Sure. Yeah, the drum player is really the one who kind of holds as kind of the centralizing anchor of the band in a lot of ways, keeping that rhythm so that the bass or the keys or the guitar can go explore, right?
Yeah, like my method of the harmonica would be a lot of times I would play songs I had never even heard before. So I would listen to the guitarist and try to be able to whistle whatever we were doing.
Yeah.
And then when it was my turn to do a solo, it was the drummer that I would match my foot up with.
Yeah.
If I didn't have a drummer, I'd have a bass player.
Mm.
So like I was in a band with John, and you just link onto that steady beat.
Yeah.
Which is so important to be able to riff around.
Yes.
And keep you on track with timing.
Mm-hmm.
They provide a huge start. That's the spine, maybe.
Yeah.
You know,
definitely.
And then you can move up and down it. But without it, it sucks because then I would have to have my shitty tambourine skills to try to hold everybody together. And you don't want to be relying on me for this.
Yeah, that's a lot
I don't
of
know
pressure.
where I'm going to go in a couple minutes.
Right. Yeah, I was just in like 13th century Tibet on a monastery on a mountaintop and snap back into
right?
Yeah.
The smoky living room.
Yes. With a bunch of crushed beer cans.
Yeah. A bunch of knuckleheads. Yeah, exactly. And that's actually like exactly would be I think it was every Tuesday night.
Yeah. Sweet.
But yeah, it's amazing the importance of that. In hypnosis, I would use a thing called brain entrainment. So I could create hypnosis CDs, and I would create this particular frequency of a beat that would lull the mind into like an alpha or theta state, which would be a natural trance-inducing state.
Yeah.
And so that's essentially what the drummers and the rattles and all that kind of stuff, a very organic kind of nature-based ritual provide.
That's sweet. Have you heard of binaural beats?
Yeah, that's what brain entrainment is.
Okay.
Binaural beats. So you have one frequency and then you have another frequency added onto
Yeah.
which create one ear and another one in another ear, which creates this oscillating pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super cool.
It's nuts.
I would embed that into my hypnotic CDs I would make for clients.
Sweet.
Yeah, really sweet.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more technology on that now where you don't really need headphones so much. You can just have it embedded in music that would create that kind of lull, which is similar if you go camping for like a week.
Mm-hmm.
When you leave, you're in that state of alpha, which is a natural frequency of nature.
Yeah.
So you just use the binaural beats to create that.
Just biomimicry or matching what's already happening.
Yeah,
in
your
nature.
brain entrains into that pattern, which happens to have a certain potential, whether it's an alpha or a theta. Often when you go into delta, you fall asleep and there's no consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
But it is possible to maintain consciousness in delta. But it's more productive, I think, to try to shoot for an alpha theta brainwave frequency.
Yeah.
And then sometimes if you had an intention, you could bring that into that state and get inspiration.
I like that.
Which is similar to like what you'd say about retreating into yourself, in a way, and then getting something and bringing it forth. But you could use binaural beats to enhance that, or the word make it predictable. I don't know, because it takes away this mystery aspect of it. But it could be more productive in some sense to have that supportive environment. Like instead of camping for a week, you just pop in binaural beats. And you get kind of like a concentrated dose of it, but it's probably what also helped with your experience of the fish concert, the mushrooms too, all that coming together to entrain your brain, free your consciousness, and then have these experiences.
It's another potential tool in the toolkit, right?
That's the way I see it, another tool in the toolkit.
Yeah.
And they don't work if you don't use them.
Right. Yeah.
So,
well,
you get these tools, you got to use them, and then they have these interesting, inspired experiences, which I think puts a little wind in your sail, so that you can get up and go pay your bills and take care of your family.
Yeah, it does. It helps balance out the responsibilities we have, right? And the weight that sometimes comes with those responsibilities, because it's not like as great as it is to have a family and have a job so that you can provide, like it's a lot of work, and it's maybe not always what you intuitively want to do. So it's good to have these other things that nurture the soul that in a different way, I guess.
And I think getting back to the hologram or that we are everything, they're both necessary. You need the dark to accent the light, right? The yin and the yang of it all. So it's a privilege to have something that maybe stresses you out, so you seek something that relieves that stress.
Yeah.
And then there's the balance between the two. And then maybe there's a transcendence of both, where there's something even greater than just a relief. I don't know. Something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it sounded perfect, to be honest. I think you knocked it out of the park on that.
Got lucky.
Yeah. Dude, this has been amazing, first of all. It's great talking to you, and I feel like I learned something every time with you now. And I hope that I know that everybody listening will pick up great things from this. What I try and do when I can remember when talking to people is ask them, what's one final thought or something that you think everybody listening should know before we kind of wrap up. So anything that...
Well, first, I just want to say thanks so much for creating this environment so that we could hang out.
Yeah.
It really has been a lot of fun, and I look forward to doing it again for sure.
Yes.
And I think that it's my answer probably is self-serving because it's what I'm into.
Yeah.
But there's so much movement people want to make in the world, whether it's a job or some kind of strategy or whatever. But you can't really, or even physical stuff, whether it's martial arts or any other athletics. It's often you can get focused on the physical components of these things, whether it's a degree or whether it's a bicep or something, or flexibility. But really, you can't have really great movement without understanding stillness. And that, to me, has been a really interesting change of focus, is by mastering stillness, you master movement. And a lot of these teachers, more of my interests have been wrapped around martial arts. I'm more of a lover than a fighter, but I do love martial arts. And some of these teachers know hundreds of forms, but yet they primarily practice meditation and stillness. And it's from that being able to have no thoughts for periods of time, that when you are in a position to make movements or thinking, you're at your best.
Yeah.
You have resources that seem to be more perfect. Body moves better, mind moves better, and it's because you've spent time being still. And I find that that's my greatest focus or interest these days, is stillness.
All right. Well, that is super wise and profound, and I'm going to reflect on that for a while once we get out of here. But I hope everybody who's watching takes that to heart. Focus on the stillness if you want to make good moves out in the world and in your life. And I guess I'll just end it with Ken. Thanks, 1,000 thanks for being here, and I hope that we'll get to talk to you again, because these are super fun conversations.
Super fun. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Cheers.